So we've had some conversations that expose some hard truths about this congregation to the light of day. And mostly people have seen the benefit, but I hear a little murmuring that maybe this was not such a good thing to do. Who will love us now? And while I understand that, I think it couldn't be farther from the truth. A congregation that knows itself can do a far better job of living into what they want to become than a congregation who lets things fester and rot in the dark. I'm pretty pumped about how open you all have been and excited for where we can go from here. To my mind, the work of the transitions is right where it needs to be, and I'm deeply grateful for a congregation committed to the journey. And as we make this journey, I'm going to ask something really difficult from you. I'm going to ask you to be vulnerable. I'm going to ask you to focus on you and not so much on they. We don't really celebrate and encourage vulnerability in our society, so I acknowledge that that is a big ask. This morning, I'm going to share why I think vulnerability is key to our work together. So when I was in seminary, my cohort was only all together a couple of days a year. And during one of those times, we were all in a big circle reporting on our capstone projects. The first 3/4 of the room raved about how well things were going for them. Their projects were amazing. They were being praised for their efforts by important people. They were single-handedly ending racism in their congregations. The UUA now had them on speed dial. They were, in short, an extraordinary gift to Unitarian Universalism. But then something shifted. The next person in the circle said something more along the lines of he wasn't sure the project was ever going to get off the ground, and the learning might come from the failing. The remaining quarter of the room, in turn, were pretty honest about how things were going. The projects were okay, but nothing to write home about. And this illustrates the beauty of vulnerability. It took some courage for that first person to say things were not going all that well in the face of so much perfection and pressure to conform. But once he took the chance, it authorized the remaining people to tell the truth as well. And this is the case so often. One of the things that causes bystander apathy is everyone trying to take their social cues about a tense situation from everyone else. We are a conforming species. But if one person can muster the courage to say, oh, this is bad, we need to act, the spell is often broken and the people will pitch in to make a bad situation better. But it takes that first courageous person to go against groupthink, and that is a vulnerable position. I would argue that vulnerability is at the core of most courageous thoughts and deeds. I think we're going to need extraordinary courage in the coming years, and courage in many arenas of our lives. And underneath all that courage, there will necessarily be vulnerability. Vulnerability is the hard, scary, tender part of the work of courage. I believe if we can exercise our vulnerability muscles, that will in turn strengthen our courage. And our UUA president, Susan Frederick Gray, has remarked that this is no time for a casual faith. And I think she's right. So we will need to gather our courage, which means we will need to foster our vulnerability so that we can meet the challenges headed our way with grit and grace. So I started my ministry career as a chaplain resident in a large Trauma One teaching hospital with a burn unit. It was a paid position with plenty of work, but there was also a classroom component, including weekly group work and individual supervision. It was easily the most intense learning environment I've ever been in. And if I could, I would arrange such a year for each of you. I love chaplaincy because people in the hospital are often down to their essentials. They're no longer worrying about trivia or even important things that turn out not to be essential to their cosmology. I was called into a room once where a woman had just learned that there was nothing more to try and that she would die now. Nurses thought she would be freaked out about dying. When I spoke with the patient, however, her only concern was for her grandson. She said, "I am the only one that loves him. What will become of him?" She could name what mattered most to her. A chaplain engages the deep suffering of humanity almost every day. Someone once said the job of a chaplain is to learn to put your hand on a hot burner, keep it there, and not get burned. And mostly I managed that, but a few times I did get burned and my heart broke. It's not easy work. I came to interim work initially to try on congregational ministry. I would joke that I didn't know what was harder, waking up to face intense suffering and death every day, or waking up to face church politics. And the jury is still out. There are a few things that I wish for you from that experience. One, if you are deep in loss on a daily basis, it forces you to sort out your own belief system. You have to know why you're walking into a patient room and engaging their pain. You also have to figure out what to do with being fragile and mortal and your own helplessness. It's harder to pretend you are not those things when suffering and death surround you. I would like to create an environment here where we get down to our own deep cosmology and figure out where we ground ourselves. What matters when the trivial burns away? The other thing I wish for you from that experience is the relentless opportunity to figure out your own mess. No matter what I brought to my individual supervisor, good or bad, he would ask what my reaction was about. I will say that is incredibly annoying. Clearly, my reaction was often about other people's bad behavior, and a little empathy would be nice. But no, that wasn't the lesson plan. Over and over, you're told that your demons are your demons. They are not going anywhere. But the more you are aware of them, and the more clearly you see them, the more choices you will have when all your buttons are pushed. You can stop reacting and start responding. And you may have heard me say that once or twice, or 3 times, or 4. So talk about vulnerable. Being required to dig deep and figure out where all your feelings are coming from is exhausting work. After a while, you have to face all those parts of you that are not all that attractive. When I would look upon some facet of myself with disgust, my supervisor would remind me that I was trying to get some need met and to think about other ways I could meet that need. And it was a raw year. And truthfully, that is what I would like to create for you, a raw year. I don't really know how to do that in this setting, but maybe we can figure it out together. So we start with ourselves. We check in every situation, especially the ones where we're wondering about someone else's bad behavior, and get curious about our own reaction. We go to those hard places and those things that we are not in love with about ourselves. We live in this basic vulnerability in order to give ourselves more choices for how we show up in this community. We're also very vulnerable in our relationships. The foundation of any congregation is its relationship, and this congregation isn't different. I think it is close relationships that have kept this place humming along for so many decades. There is a lot of caring here. For many of you, your lives are pretty entwined with one another, and this presents special challenges when someone hurts you. This is a congregation not so far from its family size roots, and family is an apt label. We have conflicts with our family, and then we have to keep on being family. And that's not an easy thing to do. And there are also newer people here who are still trying to find purchase and see if they belong. And that's its own kind of vulnerable. A friend of mine once told me he stood alone by the book table of my then congregation for as long as he could bear it and then quit coming. Nobody ever pulled him in. Being new or being on the fringe and hearing over and over how marvelously inclusive this place is can be a special kind of hell. So whether we have been here a long time or just a while, and whether we feel part of the in-group or isolated, we are all still pretty vulnerable. So I would encourage you to notice how you're reacting to one another, both the people you love, and the people you don't love so much. My son asked me once how my theology of unconditional love was compatible with my expressed desire to bury a body in the backyard. I think we all have that dual thing going on. But maybe our spiritual practice this year will be to stop wondering why so-and-so did thus and such, and what the heck is the matter with them anyway. To stop wondering why the board didn't do X or did do Y. To stop wondering why the office manager doesn't do things the right way, meaning my way. To stop wondering why the minister insists on being so wrong-headed, and to wonder instead about ourselves. Why is this making me so mad? What button is this pushing? Why am I so reactive right now? Stop and think about where your feelings are coming from and what you want to do about it. Almost always, you're continuing a story from your past, maybe from your childhood, maybe from your first marriage, maybe from the last time this sort of thing happened. Stop in every situation and figure out what is yours to own and work on. Figuring out how you're responsible is absolutely annoying work, but it is good work. I wish that for you. Being vulnerable enough to own your own mess turns out to be very empowering. When you can ground yourself, for better and worse, in your own truth, others cannot buffet you so easily. There are times we will need to be vulnerable in our collective life as well as we confront oppression and our own privilege. We will need to be vulnerable as we face growth and the loss of intimacy in this congregation, trusting that there will be compensatory gifts. There will be vulnerability in the risks of finding a new home. Vulnerability is courageously acknowledging and naming the truth. It is naming and acknowledging that the truth is messy and nuanced and that we always own a part of it. It is changing the world from where we are, the only place we can start from. It is our vulnerability, however, and not our armor, that will be our saving grace.